All right, so we've now got our guy here, and what we're gonna do is make him slash her animatable, right? So right now, the only way I can really animate is I go do, right? Like it's lame. So what we're gonna do is we are going to put a rig into it. Now the actual rigging process takes a very long time, longer than modeling, I would say. If you were going, so for me, if I was gonna rig from scratch, not using any sort of system, it would take me I don't know, probably 3 times as long to rig something as it would to probably model it. Be my guess. And I know how to rig, so I don't have to like look anything up. So it's a very long process. Most companies, though, what they'll do is they create their own pipeline and they'll have their own auto rigging solutions, and then they'll write the code and stuff to make those happen, and then they'll also have people that will make custom rigs for specific situations and things like that as well. Even when I was at Fisher Price, that's what they would do as well. We had an auto rig solution, but then we also wrote some auto rig solutions, and then we, on top of that, would have to customize certain things that we had um, in order to make the system work. If it was like a very weird particular thing, we would add special rigging things, but knowing how to rig overall is definitely important. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a built-in system that's inside of Maya called Human IK. So it's a good time. Make sure you save what you have, because anytime that anything, it's not just Maya, it goes with any program. Anytime that you have a program that is automating something where it's going to do it for you, and it's got to process a bunch of information, it's a good idea to save it, because for one, if you don't like the results, you can go back to the save beforehand. So that way you can be like, oh, you know what? I need to change something, and then I'll run it again. Also, it's a good chance it'll crash. So between those two, not a good chance, but there's a small chance it will crash. So it's a good idea to save it before you do anything that's going to be like process intensive. So just make sure you think about that. It's not this program specific, it's any program. Okay, that being said, let's do this. We've been working in modeling. Guess what? Next module. We're on the next thing. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to select this guy. Now notice I don't have his eyes or his hair selected. That's totally fine. We'll attach that in a different way. But I'm going to select just the model, which includes his head and his body. So this part here. And then you're going to go to skeleton. And normally we do all this other stuff here. But instead we're going to use Human IK. All right. Yay. Okay, so it's very important that he's in T-pose. T-pose means his arms are out and his body is forming a T. See? There's also a thing called A pose, and that's when the arms are coming down at an angle, which is what you'll probably see for most. It's more natural and it's actually superior, but Human IK actually requires it to be in T pose. So that's partly why we were modeling it this way. It makes it easier to rig in general as well. Okay, so with that, now what we're going to do is we are going to click on. So once you click on that, it's also this button here is also it. The Human IK, but we went skeleton, Human IK. There's also quick rig. Don't do quick rig though. It's not as nice. Click on that. You're going to hit create skeleton. And it's going to generate, it's probably going to be very large, this really giant skeleton, right? So what I'm going to do is I am going to hit 4, and you'll see there's a locator right between the feet. And that's more or less like everything is parented to that. So I can move this and scale it and whatever by grabbing this locator. Now, if you can't find it, just click on anything. Just keep hitting the up arrow, which will move up in the hierarchy, and then you will find what you're looking for. Okay, so I'm just going to like that. I'm going to hit R for scale, and I'm going to scale the whole guy down. Scale the whole guy down. Scale the whole guy down. All right, and then I'll hit W for move, and I'll move it down. And I'm going to get it down to roughly where his feet are, like that, and then scale it up. Now, when we work on this, what I want to do is this. I want to get the hips right. I don't care if the arms aren't up and the upper. We'll move those afterwards. That's not that big of a deal. I just want to get the hips in the right spot. So if you look, you can kind of see that it's not quite right. So it's got to come down a little bit. So let's scale. We'll say right about there. Okay. So I just want these to be where your hips would be, right? So obviously it's got to go farther out, but as far as height is concerned, it's roughly in the right location. So we'll call that good. All right, next thing I need to do is they have these settings here, okay, before we move on to the next thing. So character scale, that just actually scales the whole thing, but we just did it using this and that works fine. How many spine joints? 3 is fine. Neck is, there's just 1 joint. That's totally fine. Shoulder, clavicle. So basically this is the clavicle joint and then this is the shoulder joint. Roll bones, we don't need those, but the idea is that if you actually look at your wrist, if you go like this, your wrist can't roll. It's not possible. What rolls is actually your forearm. It's your ulna. It's your radius going around your ulna. So a lot of times they'll put a roll bone, a bone in between right here, and that will roll, and then this will also roll. And so between them, the rolling happens around them. So that's what they're talking about with those. We're not going to use those anyway, but just so you know. Now it's got finger bones. So right now it's got the 5-finger discount, but obviously we made a 4-finger. He got caught stealing. So we just need to get rid of one of them. You can get rid of whatever one you want. I would say let's get rid of the ring finger because, you know, let's save him some heartache. So we'll get rid of that finger and then we'll just use the other ones and that should be enough. We don't have any toes. It's just a single foot, so that's fine. And the rest of that's fine. Okay. So we just want to make those settings. So obviously if you have a character with more fingers or if you want to have more bones, and you can see there's settings. You can play with them. Okay. I'm just going to work my way up. And we want to work on the character's left side, his left side. Okay, so I'm going to set up all these. Not going to touch the right side. We'll fix that afterwards. All right, so when I'm moving these and doing these various things, I want you to go to definition. So you'll see there's just 3 tabs here. Okay, click on definition. Now, if for some reason I am naughty and do something I'm not supposed to, why hang on a second. Let's try this. This will do it. Let's say I'm like, right? Oh no. Why is it not? It's not breaking. Let's try this. That's really weird. Why is it not breaking? I don't know. I think it's not updating. Hang on a second. It's weird. Well, not sure why that's not working. Something's amiss here, but basically there's certain ways you can't bend a leg, right? So if you look at my my knee here, we can't do this with our knees, right? Because if we did, that's what we do to people we don't like, right? So that's not possible, right? The knee should only bend this way. So you're only supposed to bend it and move it and rotate it in certain ways. And what I want you to do is keep an eye on it over here. Let's see, will this do it? There he goes. Okay. See how it turned orange? That means it's naughty. No good. Can't do that. Okay? So I want you, when you're moving and rotating and positioning these joints inside of this body, I want you to keep an eye on this over here. If you see this turn colors, that it's no longer green, you need to go back and undo so that it's green again, and then do something different. Okay? So just be aware that that's what needs to happen. So I'm going to take this leg, and what I want to do is, generally speaking, there are 3 rules that we're looking to do, okay? Well, there's 2 main things we're worried about. One, we're worried about the geometry. So we want to try and get the bone in the geometry, in the model, in a way that when the model does deform, when it flexes, okay, that it's going to deform well. The other influence that we're worried about is anatomy. So obviously, I want my knee or my elbow to bend where my elbow is, right? Like, it might be better if it was here for whatever reason with my model, but I want it to bend based on anatomy and based on the model itself, okay? Now, there's certain things we have to take into account when we're doing that. So, with the model, generally, what we're looking for is I want the joints, the skeleton here, the joints, to be in the center of mass. Meaning, if I had a tube like this, like let's say this was my leg, right? It's this thing here. I'd want the joint to be directly in the center. Like if you were to look at a cross section, I want it right in the center of the mass, okay? Most of the time. That's not always the case, but very often, okay? So, in fact, actually, when I'm looking at this, you can see everything's a little bit forward. So I'm going to grab this thing here, and I'm going to push this back a little bit to try and put it into more of the center of the character. See how nice in the center? Okay. So with this was over here. I'm going to take this and I'm just going to push this way. And I want to try and get it more or less sort of centered. So see how it's the center of the leg here? It's pretty good. And then if I look here, it's mostly center too. And I'm looking over here and it's not angry at me. So that's good. Great. Next, what I want to do is position this knee. Okay. What we can't do is this. I don't know why it's not doing an error, but you can't do that. We also can't rotate this leg. Okay. That's also a no-no. So, we're going to try and keep it in center. So I'm going to take this. All right. And I'm looking at this. And if you look, so besides being in the center, besides being in the center of the mass here and this way, so in the center of the mass, the other thing I want to do is this. Let me hit 5 so you can see. So I've been in 4 mode. I'm going to hit 5 and I'm going to show you a couple things we can do. So with 5 on, if you go to view, you can do, shading, you can do X-ray joints. And now the joints are X-rayed. So we can see through, they're always going to be seen through the model. I'm also going to turn on wireframe unshaded. Okay. All right, that might be a little bit easier to see. You could also try X-ray, shading X-ray, or just X-ray in general, but I think this works fine. So besides being in the center of the mass, the other thing I want to do is be in the center of these edge loops. Remember before I was saying that we need to put at least 3 edge loops on every area that's going to deform, so that way when it flexes, they'll spread with it like this. So if you look, you can see this is not on the center of the knee. So I need to move this guy up. And so these are the 3 edge loops. This one, and this one. Okay. So I want to put him on the center edge loop. Now, the other thing that would be good to do is this. I'm going to take this, and although my knee can't be like this, right? Because then I'd have rickets. My knee can be more forward. So I'm going to put this more forward towards the front. Because if you look at your knee, the knee bends more or less from the front of the leg, from the front of the that's where the flexion is, not as much from the middle. Okay, so we're actually going to push it just a little bit. That's probably a little more forward, a little bit forward like this. So we'll say halfway between center and forward and the front. Okay, so this would be center, this would be the front, so about halfway. All right, now this one represents my ankle. So these are my 3 ankle loops right here. So I'm just going to go up, and then I'm just going to push it back and down, and we'll call that good. And I can't go side to side, right? Because that would be weird. Your leg can't bend that way. But there can be a little bit of a bend this way. That's why we can move forward. I can move this one this way, but not this way. Okay? Just to get that idea. All right. Now, this joint represents the ball of my foot. So if you look, you can see I have these three edge loops. Now, this is a little bit different. So first I'm going to go like this. And instead of doing the center of mass, which is typically what we want, is that the pivot of this is actually going to be at the bottom of the foot. If I put this in the center, what will happen is that when this folds, this toe, it'll actually push it into the ground. But if I put it in the center, when it goes to fold, it will always pivot from here. So this will never go into the ground. So it's kind of a weird spot position, but that's where it goes. It's basically the center of these 3 edge loops, and then at the bottom, okay? Like that. So we'll call that good for the leg. All right. And we're not going to worry about the other side right yet, but we will eventually. All right. So next what we're going to do is move these up here. Now you want to work proximal to distal. So if you look, this is my center one. If I move this, all the other ones move with it. And if I move this one, you'll notice that the ones underneath move, and as I go down, the other ones move. So you want to work from the upper part of the joint chain downwards. So I just worked from the center point here down. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to work from here and work my way up the spine, right? And then out the arms and up the head, okay? So we're going to work our way up. So this one's fine. I know, the bottom one there is fine. Basically, I want this. This is the neck. That's got to go to the base of the neck. And this is basically the top of the spine. So what we're looking for is if you were to bend your body back and forth, right, side to side, what you're going to notice is that obviously the stomach area is soft, okay, and the chest is hard. Most of your flexion, your deformation is actually coming more from the waist and not really from the chest, because your chest can't bend, right? There's a little bit of wiggle, but really that's just the muscles and stuff you're feeling underneath. Your actual costal area where your rib cage is doesn't really bend. So what I want to do is I basically want these ones here, this one, and this one, to span the gap up to roughly where, we'll say a little bit above, well, we'll say where the costal arch is. So if you feel like your sternum, your breastbone here, this bone right here, right? So you got your manubrium, and then your gladiolus, and then your xiphoid process, right? So that bone right here, basically where your rib cage comes up, right there is where I want it to get to. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to evenly move these up so that they end up there. So I'm just going to push this up a little bit. I'm going to hit the down arrow to move down the joint chain. Push this up a little bit, down arrow, push this up a little bit. And we'll call that probably good enough. It's not really that big of a deal. Just trying to spread them across. Maybe grab this one and move this one up a little bit more. Trying to get I just want them to generally be spread across the spine to roughly this area, right? So that's about right. Right? His rib cage probably would be right about here. So it's pretty close. All right. Now I'm going to take this one, and this is the base of the neck. So I'm just going to go up to where the neck is. So basically where the neck meets the body. So the bottom of the neck, okay? And that's roughly center of mass, and we'll say right there. That's fine. And then I'm going to go up, and then this is going to be the top of the neck. So where the head meets the neck, okay? So that's roughly actually a little bit below the ears, okay? So I'm going to put this right about, we'll say, here, okay? That looks fine. All right, now we need to do the clavicle and the arm. Now, this gets a little bit weird because, in actuality, the clavicle bone is not, like, the pivot's actually from kind of the center. But we're going to move it a little bit over, and we're going to move it, we'll say like that. What I want to do is I want to move the clavicle bone. So this is the one that's going to, this is our collarbone, right? So it's this guy right here. It's the, you know what I'm talking about? I'm going to move that right about there, okay? I want to move it in a way that's going to make the arm straight, the arm bone line up with the rest, okay? So like that. So I'm making sure I don't really have any wiggle room up and down. It has to be right here. Now, there's wiggle room this way, so I'll go right about in the middle-ish between here and where the shoulder would be, okay? So that's roughly where I want it, and it's centered this way, so that's fine. So now I'm going to hit the down arrow, and then you can see this guy, he's got to go where the shoulder is. And so here are my 3 edge loops, and we'll say right about there, it's good, okay? Now I'm going to hit the down arrow. This is my elbow. I'm going to take this and move this down to where the elbow is, which is right here. And then I'm going to hit down arrow. And then you can also just click, you know, if that works too. But I like to do the down arrow, which is a little bit easier. And then move this roughly to where my 3 edge loops are with this. Okay. That looks fine. Now, my elbow is going to be the same thing as my my knee, where the pivot's actually towards the back, not in the center. I'm trying to see if we can. So if you look, you can see all this compression and stuff that happens on the inside, but notice that this stays still because I'm actually pivoting from the outside of my elbow, not from the inside, okay? So that's kind of what I want to have in here as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it, but watch. If I push this out, it moves this back. Also, this one, not good. So I don't know if it'll let me do this. Let me see something. That'll work. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold D, like when we move pivot, and that will actually allow you to slide it back. And we're going to go like that. Now, again, it's somewhat halfway between the center and to the back. Because the thing is, all the way to the back would be more correct, but we have to take both into account. We have to take the model into account, and we have to take anatomy into account. So you're not going to go 100% with one or the other. All right? Okay, we'll call that good. Now we have the hand here, and the hand, you can see, is a little bit small. I'm just going to select the wrist joint, and I'm just going to scale it. The scale doesn't really matter, but it will help position it. So I'm going to scale this up until basically the base of these fingers line up here. So let me see. That goes there. That one goes there. This one goes there. Actually, never mind. That's not quite right. These actually have to go about the middle of the palm is where you want these. I know it seems weird, but the reason being is that, I don't know if you can tell, but your palms actually can kind of expand and contract. And these are actually meant to represent, like this is your carpals. These represent the metacarpals, right? So these are the ones that, I don't know if you can see my bones in my hands here, but it's these guys here, okay? All right, that's fine. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy here, and nicely here, actually, you don't have the same constraints as you do. I'm going to hit this little arrow here. You don't have the same constraints that you do with the rest of it, where you can't move it in certain axes. These you can move in pretty much all the axes. So I'm going to take this, and we're going to move this guy towards the end a little bit. I'm going to move this one more towards the middle, so it's kind of lined up with the middle. Take this one, we'll go like that. And this one I'm going to move this way. And then this is going to move, we'll leave it right about there. Now this joint is going to be the base joint here. So I'm just going to click and drag it, bring it over here, so that it's right at the base. Hit the down arrow. And I'm just going to pull it straight for this joint. Hit the down arrow. And then move this one right here. Same thing here. So we're going to pull this one for the base. Down arrow. This will be the middle knuckle, and then this will be the last knuckle. Okay. Now, if you notice, we don't have, actually missed this a little bit. Hang on a second. We don't have 3 edge loops here. We only have 2 for the fingers because we didn't want to make it too dense in there. So these should be in the middle of these. Of these doubles. So that looks like that's centered. That one looks fine. Okay. So same thing here. Pull this guy up, put it right about there. Notice I'm grabbing this. Do not move them up and down. I'm only moving them in these 2 axes. So this way and this way. So you see these are all lined up straight this way. It's like, well, one looks like it's higher, but I'm not sure what happened with that. But I think it was like that to begin with. It's not my fault. Okay. Then pull this straight. Down arrow, pull this one straight, so it ends up with this. All right, let's do the thumb. So I'll take this guy, put this right at the base of the thumb. And to do this, you can see the thumb, they have it going straight. Ours is coming down. So I'm going to hit rotate on this and just rotate it like this. Oops. Okay. Like so. I'm trying to line it up. Now, if you look, you see this blue here? I want this to line up. Let's go a little bit more this way. I want this to line up with my thumb, because when this thumb goes to curl, it's going to go in that direction, right? Because if I were to look at my thumb, I want it to curl in. So that blue is going to be the axis I use in order to curl in. So that needs to be lined up with basically the flat part of my thumb. So I'm going to put that one there with the down arrow. I'm going to hit W for the move. And then I guess we'll just manually move it down. So I'm just going to pull this one down, I guess, here. And we'll say here, and then down, and move this one down a little bit farther, like so. All right, let's see how that goes. Okay. Yay. All right, so that is the hand, and yeah, so now we've got all the parts. But if you look, you can see it doesn't match up here. So what we're going to do is we are going to flip it. So there is a button right here. Let's see, that is not, oh, maybe I gotta go back to skeleton. Where are you? Here it is. You gotta click back on skeleton. Let's get that messed up. And if you click on this, it'll actually mirror the skeleton, this little button here. Boop. And now you'll see it'll mirror it across, and now they have the same on both sides. So this button here, click on skeleton. Now I'll go back to definition. I'm gonna back out of this, and you can see it still all looks good, so that's good. You might want to save it here. I'm just gonna go ahead and save it because it's gonna do a little bit of calculation in a second here. Okay, 11. All right. So The last thing to do are the controls. Before I bother doing that, though, I actually want to bind the skeleton, or bind my model to this skeleton. It'll make it a little bit easier to work with, as opposed to trying to do it after it's finished making the stuff. Because right now, if I go to rotate this, obviously it doesn't affect my model in any way. So I want to bind the model to it. So what I want you to do is click on any joint, doesn't really matter, and hit the up arrow until you get to the root. Do not go up until you get this. I do not want this selected. You can actually just click right on this, but if you don't want to do that, you can hit up arrow until you get to, oops, I went too far. So you want just this. So make sure the pivot's showing there. So you select that, shift select the model, all right, not the other pieces, just the body model. And then you're going to go to skin, bind skin, option box. I'm not going to go too nuts into like what these mean, but you know, so we want joint hierarchy. That just means that when I select the top joint, it's going to go through all the joints. Otherwise, it'd be just the joints to select or just objects. You can also find objects. Geodesic voxel. All you need to know really is that this is the oldest, second newest, newest. Generally, newer is better, right? So heat map's not bad. Try geodesic voxel. It should work on this model fine. But in the future, if your model doesn't work with geodesic voxel, then try heat map. If heat map doesn't work, then you just move your way back. But the last one is the best, okay? So it uses voxels in order to calculate the binding. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. Skinning mode, classic linear is totally fine. We don't want the quaternion. So that's a whole nother system and you don't care about it. Interactive is good. Weight distribution, distance is fine. I don't really care about max influences. I need to do things. Turn off maintain max influences. That means it'll force it to be that many influences. What this means is that on every vertice, by default, there are allowed to be 5 joints that affect a single vertice. In almost all cases, there's usually 2 joints, right? So like let's say I have an elbow, right? When this elbow bends, you know, this vertice is going to move, right? It's going to be affected by this joint and this joint, right? It's only ever going to be 2. Now there are times where it's not. So like over here, there you could have 3 basically in the pelvis and in the shoulder area, and probably other places too, right here. So, but for the most part, it's either going to be 2 or 3. So 5 really doesn't make any sense. Let's go ahead, and for ease of use, I'm going to do 2. Really, I would normally do 3, but I don't want to paint weights and stuff with you, so we're going to do 2. Colorized skeleton is going to make it like colored, the skeleton. It really doesn't do anything. He's added in there as a cheesy effect. We'll leave it on so you can see it. It's rainbow bright. It'll make you happy. Okay. Fall off, I never touch. The resolution, basically, 256 is fine. Usually I go like 512. We'll do 256 and validate. That's fine. Now we're going to hit bind skin, and it's going to do a little bit of calculation. I'm kind of curious as how this is going to work because I have that weird thing down there that seems to be stuck. So I'm going to see if it actually... Oh, it did work. And it still left the thing. So you should see a bar down here. I don't know what's going on with mine. That'll go across and you'll see that it worked. Now, watch this. If I do this, you see how it's rainbow bright? If I go to rotate this down, you can see now it's bound to my skeleton. So if you bend the skeleton, it thusly bends your character. Woo! Okay. Now, this is still kind of clunky to animate. So what we're going to do is select the high... I don't think this matters, but just do it anyway. Select the main joint. We're going to go to Controls. And now what I want you to do is you'll see Source here. I want you to click, and I want you to choose Control Rig. And you're going to see it's going to make a rig for us. Okay. So what this does now is it makes it much easier to animate. So now I can grab this. Go ahead and save this. Okay, save this as the... let's just save it. We'll just replace it. I don't really care. So we'll save it. Now, you can grab this and move it. And if I pull it, woo, it's great, right? You can grab a leg and move that leg around, right? It's like he's skating or something. I can do this. Grab that. Here you go. He's dancing. All right, you can do it dance. All right, so this is human IK. And we'll show you how to animate with it a little bit later. Just whatever you do, make sure you undo it so he's back to default state. All right, so a couple other things I just want to do real quick before we're done with this. It's not going to be perfect, just so you are aware. There are ways of making it perfect, but it's time consuming. It's called weight painting. So you see how like his arm gets collapsed here? Maybe I'll show you that. I don't know. If we have time, I'll show you. I'm not going to show you this week though, because it's too much work for you. So what I want to do is that right now when I rotate my head and stuff, you see those parts stay away. I need to just basically parent those. So I'm going to select this and this and this. Select all three of them. And then I'm going to hit Control G to make a group. All right. And you'll see this is called groups. I went to the channel box. And I'll just call this head_GRP. So now it's in a group. And while I still have that selected, I'm just going to hold Shift and click on this. So now this is the last thing I selected. I'm going to hit P. That will parent those items to this joint. So when that joint moves, these will also move. Now it's going to be off to start with here. I will show you how to fix this later. But now at least it is somewhat correct. It's not actually off. It's actually the model that's off. But what? Okay. We are going to call that good on the rigging. And I'm going to do one last thing with you. One more video. And we're just going to do blend shapes, which is basically facial expressions. Okay. But we'll do that next time. So save what you got here. And then, so Control S. And then, yeah, in the next video we'll do that. And then you'll be done.